Hi everyone, my name is Larraitz and today I am going to talk about the Australian cost of living crisis in 2024 from a macroeconomic perspective. I am going to start with a definition of cost of living crisis for then to create a context since COVID-19. I will analyze unemployment, inflation, the monetary and fiscal policies and their consequence in the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model. I will analyze as well the GDP to talk about the economic situation of Australia and the consequence of all this for the Australian people. The cost of living crisis refers to a situation when the prices of everyday goods and services rise significantly, while wages and income do not increase at the same pace, resulting in a decrease in people's purchasing power. Watching news, we always hope for this to be part of the history. However, this is happening today. The Australian economy grew by only 0.1% over the first quarter of 2024 and just 1.1% over the previous 12 months. How we did arrive here, living in the lucky country? Australia's economy has seen a steady GDP growth over the past decade, and then COVID-19 arrived. One in a lifetime catastrophe where people died, lost jobs, closed businesses and borders were closed, dropping the economy and well-being of the whole society. Consequently, the following graph reflects the significant impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the labor market, which reached the 7% of unemployment in 2021. This period was followed by a recovery and stabilization in the unemployment rate from 2021 onwards. Today, it is hovering between 4% and 4.5%. To help Australians going through this tough situation, the Reserve Bank of Australia, the RBA, which is the Central Bank of Australia, in November 2020 dropped the cash rates to 0.1%, making borrowing money cheap. After passing the worst part of the pandemic, cheap money was looking good, until the consequence of long period of record low rates arrived. Inflation was here, reaching the peak of 7.8% in 2022. But what is exactly inflation? Inflation is a sustained increase in the general price level of common goods and services represented in the basket of goods. In the following graph, we can see represented the consumer price index, or the percentage of this change over the years. It is noticeable the difference pre- and post-pandemic, and how we are working to the target rate of inflation. In this case, how is the RBA been managing the economy to being able to drop the inflation rate from 7.8% to the target in between 2 and 3%? In May 2022, the RBA raised the cash rate to 0.35%, initiating 13 consecutive interest rate hikes as illustrated in the following graph. As of September 2024, the RBA Governor Michelle Bullock announced that the cash rate remains at its peak at 4.35%. This rise reflects a contractionary monetary policy aimed at reducing aggregate demand to combat inflation. The RBA accomplished this through open market operations by selling government bonds to commercial banks, which reduce the money supply in the economy as banks make payments for these transactions. This leads to an increase of cash and interest rates, decrease of consumption and investment, what caused a leftward shift in the aggregate demand, leading to lower prices and potential GDP contraction. This decrease in GDP represents the cost of controlling inflation through higher interest rates, as illustrated in the presented graph. Perfect! The inflation is controlled. The RBA made a great job. And now, what are the consequences of that drop of the GDP? The gross domestic product, GDP, is one of the tools to measure the economic growth of a country. It is the sum of the market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given period of time. As illustrated in the following graph, Australia has avoided a technical recession as we have not experienced 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. However, this distinction may be more of a statistical anomaly. GDP serves as a crude measure of economic performance, reflecting the total value of goods and services produced over the year. While it is a reasonable metric when the population is stable, Australia has welcomed a significant influx of immigrants in the past 2 years, which artificially boost overall GDP figures. So, as William Shakespeare would say, recession or no recession? That is the question. The answer is yes in terms of GDP per capita, but no by general GDP due to the overseas immigration, international students, and the government spending. Excluding these effects, as observed in the presented table, GDP per capita has declined for 6 consecutive quarters, indicating a decrease in the standard of living for Australians. Although Australia may not fit the technical definition of a recession, we have effectively been in one for a year and a half, starting shortly after the RBA began raising interest rates. So, what is exactly what the Australian government has done? Through the Planned Budget 2024, it has established change in the following 7 aspects: tax cut for every taxpayer, energy bill relief, families, health and Medicare, income support, housing, and wages and employment. Thanks to these measures from the government, Australians have been managing better the crisis. However, in terms of aggregate supply and aggregate demand, it is creating a dilemma between the decision of the RBA to establish a contractionary monetary policy based on the reduction of the inflation and the government with its expansionary monetary policy based on the relief of the people. In conclusion, the cost of living crisis in Australia is driven by various macroeconomic factors. While inflation has been controlled, rising interest rates and falling GDP per capita present significant challenges. The balance between the RBA's contractionary measures and the government's relief effort is delicate, and the balance between both it is a must for Australia being able to emerge from this crisis stronger and for secure a better economic future for all. Thank you.